You might have noticed something weird about Donald Trump's lawyers.
What politics is, it's lawyers versus lawyers. So now you hope your team, Republicans or Democrats, have the best lawyers so they can go after the other guy, but it feels like the Republicans don't. Never feels like they have the best lawyers.
Never feels like they have the best lawyers.
Yes, Greg, it's so weird. Why can't Donald Trump and the Republicans hire good lawyers? It must be because they can't afford those great corporate lawyers who everyone knows are known for being Democrats. Now, with all his criminal entanglements, as well as his habit of filing a mountain of civil lawsuits, Donald Trump employs an army of lawyers. And in fact, his Save America Political Action Committee spent more than $21 million this year on lawyers for Trump and his associates. And boy, is he mad about it.
Getting the Trump campaign to spend vast amounts of money on legal fees, thereby having less to spend on ads showing that Crooked Joe is the worst president in United States history.
Yeah, but the problem for Trump is he's quite possibly the world's worst client, and so the best lawyers in the country won't go near him. Even before January 6th, his reputation for stiffing his counsel and erratic behavior drove away powerhouse conservative firms like Jones Day and Kirkland & Ellis. Plus, there's his habit of attacking judges, prosecutors, witnesses, jurors, civil servants, and even his own lawyers on social media. But after the attack on the Capitol, Trump became completely toxic, to the point that he often has to pay millions of dollars up front to convince competent lawyers to leave their law firms to represent him. Which means that Trump is facing down 4 serious criminal indictments accompanied by a motley crew of attorneys with, varying qualifications. So let's rank them. So we'll start with S tier. There are no S-tier lawyers. Donald Trump doesn't hire or can't hire S-tier lawyers. There just aren't any. Sorry. But that takes us to A tier. Yes, somewhere near the top of the Trump legal mountain, or I guess legal foothill, sits New York attorney Todd Blanche, a former federal prosecutor and white-collar criminal defense attorney in New York. Blanche left the law firm of Cadwalader, Wickersham, and Taft in April and now represents Trump in the New York State case, the Florida documents case, and the election interference case in DC. And if you're looking for a cheat to decode Trump's lawyers, here it is. The more time they spend in TV studios running their mouths, the less serious they are about their day jobs. And Todd Blanche is never on television, and neither is Susan Necheles, a highly respected criminal defense lawyer in New York. Necheles represents Trump in the New York prosecution, as well as the E. Jean Carroll civil defamation suits. Also A tier is Chris Kise, Florida's former Solicitor General, who is also pretty camera shy. In August of 2022, Trump's Save America PAC paid Kise $3 million to leave the nationally recognized firm of Foley and Lardner. Now, at the time, Trump was trying to fend off the documents investigation, but after advising the former president to simply give back everything he swiped and make a deal to avoid prosecution, Kise was banished to work on the New York civil case against Trump and the Trump Organization for submitting false financial info to banks and insurance companies. Because what better use of an expert in Florida law who knows every judge in the Sunshine State than to ship him off to New York, right? But now Kise is back on the documents case since Trump couldn't find anyone else who was both admitted to practice law in the Southern District of Florida and willing to be associated with the MAGA world. And then rounding out A tier, we have Steve Sadow, a criminal defense lawyer in Atlanta with a lot of experience representing celebrity clients and battling Georgia's expansive RICO law. But on the eve of his surrender to law enforcement, Trump swapped Sadow in for self-proclaimed billion-dollar lawyer Drew Findling, who spent the last 6 months trying and failing to head off the Georgia indictment. But now let's skip to B tier, and man, it is all downhill from here. First up, we have John Lauro, the Tampa-based attorney leading the defense in Trump's DC prosecution. He spent a lot of time on TV and managed to hit each of the 5 Sunday talk shows on August 6th after the DC indictment dropped. Lauro made a series of wild claims as he hopped from camera to camera, and he told Chuck Todd that, quote,
"A technical violation of the Constitution is not a violation of criminal law."
He promised George Stephanopoulos that
Mike Pence will be one of our best witnesses at trial.
And on CBS, he vowed to ask the court to move the trial out of DC to West Virginia for diversity. And here's Dana Bash's face when Lauro described the peaceful transition of power in 2021.
There was a peaceful transition of power. So that's how the Constitutional works.
Okay. What happened
Now,
on
one thing
January
that needs
6th
to be
was not
clear is
peaceful.
And Lauro's not just making those crazy arguments to the cameras. In court, he objected to a protective order blocking Trump from posting evidence from the case on Truth Social, calling it a content-based regulation on President Trump's political speech. and complaining that, quote, in a trial about First Amendment rights, the government seeks to restrict First Amendment rights. Then another B-tier Trump lawyer who loves the spotlight is New York litigator Joseph Tacopina. After a jury awarded E. Jean Carroll $5 million for sexual assault and defamation, Tacopina congratulated himself and his client on the courthouse steps because, quote,
Donald Trump was not branded a rapist.
Tacopina is also part of the team representing Trump in the New York criminal case. Here he is explaining to Ari Melber that Trump simply had to lie to the public about the payoff to Stormy Daniels because she was extorting him, and they signed a confidentiality agreement.
Because it was a confidential settlement. So if he acknowledged that, he would be violating the confidential settlement. So is it the truth? Of course it's not the truth. Was he supposed to tell the truth? He would be in violation of the agreement if he told the truth.
Oddly enough, Tacopina also claimed back in 2018 to have an attorney-client relationship with Daniels because she consulted with him briefly about the very same matter, which is probably true and is very worrying. Though a New York judge recently decided that there is no conflict based on Tacopina's representations. Then moving down the proverbial ladder to C tier, we get to Jim Trusty and John Rowley, who represented Trump while he was being investigated by special counsel Jack Smith in both the documents case and the January 6th investigation. And they had some success in the summer of 2022 when Judge Eileen Cannon temporarily put the documents case on hold before being humiliatingly reversed by the 11th Circuit. But Trusty and Rowley had no such success in DC, where former Chief Judge Beryl Howell blasted their attempts to use executive privilege to block former Trump administration officials from testifying to the grand jury. Trusty also filed a $475 million lawsuit alleging that CNN defamed the former president by using the phrase, the big lie. Trump and Trusty claimed to be, quote, vindicating the First Amendment's marketplace of ideas, but the case got tossed because calling someone names is not defamation. In May, Trusty and Rowley sent a completely nutty letter to Attorney General Merrick Garland demanding that he meet with them to, quote, discuss the ongoing injustice that is being perpetrated by your special counsel and his prosecutors. No president of the United States has ever in the history of our country been baselessly investigated in such an outrageous and unlawful fashion. And they got their meeting at the Justice Department, albeit not with the AG, but just days later, the special counsel indicted Trump in the documents case. A day later, Trusty and Rowley quit, calling it, quote, a logical moment for us to step aside and let others carry the cases through to their completion. They added that they had, quote, no plans to hold media appearances that address our withdrawals or any other confidential communications we've had with the president or his legal team. Now, that was probably a backhanded reference to Tim Parlatore, another C-tier attorney who left Trump's legal team a month before Trusty and Rowley. And on his way out the door, Parlatore blamed yet another Trump lawyer, Boris Epshteyn, who is really just a close advisor of Trump's. Parlatore told CNN's Paula Reed that Epshteyn had, quote,
who had really done everything he could to try to block us, to prevent us from doing what we could to defend the president, who's not very honest with us or with the client on certain things.
But more on Boris in a minute. He's not in the C tier. But it is quite unusual for an attorney to quit and then share details of the client representation on national television, or, at least it used to be. Also nixed from the Trump legal team, although not by choice, is Evan Corcoran, known in the documents indictment as Trump attorney number 1. After Trump got a grand jury subpoena, Corcoran negotiated with the Justice Department to turn over all remaining classified documents at Mar-a-Lago. And according to prosecutors, Trump asked Corcoran, quote, what happens if we just don't respond at all or don't play ball with them? And, quote, wouldn't it be better if we just told them we don't have anything here? Just asking questions. After Corcoran told Trump that's really not how subpoenas go, they agreed that the lawyer would fly to Florida and search the pool shed where Trump was storing boxes full of government documents. But of course, before Corcoran arrived, Trump had his Florida co-defendants Walt Nauta and Carlos de Oliveira to bring the boxes upstairs so he could pull out what he wanted to keep, allegedly. And before Corcoran arrived on June 2nd, 2022, Nauta and de Oliveira returned the boxes to the storage locker. Corcoran searched the boxes and found 38 documents with classified markers, which he returned to the FBI on June 3rd, along with a certification promising that no more remained on the property. But while Corcoran prepared that certification, it was actually attorney Christina Bobb who signed it, which is why Corcoran is in the C tier and Bobb is a little bit further down. But of course, that certification was false, as the FBI discovered 2 months later when it turned up with a warrant and discovered more than 100 additional classified documents on the premises, some of them containing sensitive military secrets. But Trump's lies put Corcoran in a position where no lawyer wants to be. Judge Howell ruled that Trump had lied to his counsel, enlisting him in a criminal scheme, and so the crime fraud exception could be used to pierce the attorney-client privilege. Corcoran was forced to testify to the grand jury and hand over his notes, including a lengthy voice memo he dictated to himself describing the entire episode. This formed the basis of several counts of the document's indictment, including conspiracy to obstruct justice, withholding a document or record, concealing a document in a federal investigation, and making false statements. It also turned Corcoran into a witness against his own client, after which he was forced to withdraw the representation. Now, these lawyers are terrible, but if you need a good lawyer, my firm, the Eagle team, can help. If you've had an injury or death in the family, suffered from a data breach, or were involved in a car crash, or almost anything else, we can represent you or help find you the right attorney who can. Just click on the link in the description for a free consultation with my team. Because you don't just need a legal team, you need the Eagle team. The link is below. Now back to Trump's terrible attorneys. And that leaves just one more Trump lawyer earning a berth into the coveted C tier. Jesse Bennell came into Trump's orbit during the election, and he handles much of the appellate work where Trump has to make bad arguments with a straight face. In 2020, Bennell sued Nevada, falsely claiming that Trump won the state. He represented Trump in his effort to block the National Archives from releasing his presidential records to the January 6th committee. And he's currently representing Trump in an appeal of a doomed RICO lawsuit that he filed against Hillary Clinton in Florida. And after prosecutors started pointing out in their briefing that Lauro seemed to be spending all of his time on TV talking about the case, Team Trump dispatched Bennell in his stead to explain to CNN how Mike Pence was going to be a star witness for Team Trump.
But if it ever does make it to trial, Mike Pence is going to be a star witness for Donald Trump.
Okay, and now we're just jumping right into the legal chasm that is F tier. Or as Trump campaign chief Jason Miller referred to it, the Star Wars bar. At this point in the game, it's probably easiest to divide Trump's lawyers into attorneys who haven't been named as co-conspirators and those who have. In the second category, New York lawyer Alina Habba stands out for her willingness to say literally anything in defense of her client. Habba accused the FBI of planting classified documents at Mar-a-Lago. She called Trump the
most ethical American I know.
And she threatened mayhem if the DOJ dared to indict her client. Habba is responsible for some of Trump's weirder lawsuits, including one against the New York Times for publishing Trump's tax records. That one got tossed out without sanctions, but she wasn't as lucky in the civil RICO suit against Hillary Clinton, James Comey, and dozens of other Democrats and FBI officials. In that case, a Florida federal judge ordered Trump and Habba to cough up almost $1 million in attorney's fees and castigated Habba for wasting the court's time. Quote, "This case should never have been brought. Its inadequacy as a legal claim was evident from the start. No reasonable lawyer would have filed it." Habba and her partner, Michael Medeo, also represented Trump in the E. Jean Carroll case and the New York AG's civil prosecution. And adding grist for the mill, Trump's lawyers Michael Medeo, Clifford Robert, Michael Farina, Chris Kise, and Armin Morian were all fined and sanctioned in the New York AG civil suit against the Trump org, in which the Trump org has been ordered to be dissolved. And yes, we are definitely working on a video about that. But recently, Trump announced that Habba would be withdrawing to take a position with Trump's Save America PAC as his legal spokesperson and media representative on legal matters. In essence, she's getting paid by Trump's donors to go on TV and defend him rather than practice law, which honestly is probably a much better deal for everyone. But she's not the only one. Christina Bobb, a former JAG lawyer turned One American News host, cut out the middleman and came to work for Trump after the election. She's the one who signed the false declaration saying that there were no more classified documents at Mar-a-Lago and is described as Trump attorney number 3 in the document's indictment. She apparently testified to the grand jury, meaning that she may well be a witness for the prosecution in that case. Nevertheless, Bob regularly takes to the airwaves to confidently claim things like,
"It's kind of funny. I think the folks in New York, President Trump and his family, probably had a better view than I did because they had the CCTV that they were able to watch. I was stuck in the parking lot there to, collect paper and answer questions, but they were actually able to see the whole thing. So they actually have a better idea of what took place inside."
And that was over a year ago, and so far, all we've gotten is an indictment that alleges that Trump ordered his henchmen to delete the security camera footage. But maybe we'll get a peek at those tapes during Infrastructure Week. But while Bob doesn't enter her appearances in court on Trump's behalf, attorney Lindsay Halligan does. The former minor insurance defense lawyer had never worked a single federal case before coming into Trump's orbit in 2022 and entering her appearance in the Florida documents case and the lawsuit against CNN. She also attended meetings at the Justice Department with Trustee and Rowley, although most of what she appears to do is TV hits.
Ms. Willis seems to want this case to be televised, and I'm sure she's very proud of herself.
And finally, let's talk about the lawyers who were with Trump as he tried to overturn the 2020 election. Special counsel Jack Smith's indictment referred to 6 unindicted co-conspirators, all of whom were lawyers, and 5 of those were actually charged along with him in Georgia. First up in this list in F tier, we have a man who needs no introduction, Rudy Giuliani. The former federal prosecutor and mayor of New York played a central role in both Trump impeachments. In 2019, Rudy convinced Trump that there was dirt to be had in Ukraine on Joe Biden, and the next year he led the charge to overturn Biden's massive electoral college win. And along the way, he leaked hair dye all over the RNC, convened a national press conference in a landscaper's parking lot across from a porn shop, got lampooned in a Borat movie in a highly compromising situation, earned himself several multi-million-dollar defamation suits, and got suspended from the practice of law. In the DC indictment, he's described as co-conspirator number 1, an attorney who was willing to spread knowingly false claims and pursue strategies that the defendant's 2020 re-election campaign attorneys would not. And in Georgia, he's facing 13 charges for his role in the conspiracy to steal that state's electors for Donald Trump. Standing next to Rudy at the RNC podium but leaking conspiracy theories instead of hair dye was Sidney Powell, or as the DC indictment describes her, co-conspirator 3, an attorney whose unfounded claims of election fraud the defendant privately acknowledged to others sounded crazy. Vowing to release the Kraken, she claimed to have evidence of massive fraud in all the swing states. Powell and her allies filed upwards of a dozen lawsuits seeking to overturn the election results. None of them were successful, although Powell did manage to get herself sanctioned for filing bogus affidavits in her Michigan Kraken case without bothering to see if they were true. After the lawsuits failed, Powell tried to get Trump to name her special counsel so she could seize all the voting machines and investigate the fraud that she was certain had occurred. And like Giuliani, Powell is now a defendant in multiple defamation suits filed by voting machine companies, whom she accused of stealing the election, and she netted herself 7 charges in Fulton County. Also at the RNC podium that day was Jenna Ellis, or as she describes herself, Dr. Jenna Ellis, constitutional law expert. Pro tip, never trust any attorney who insists on going by doctor. Ellis started her legal career in traffic court in Colorado, where she was fired for incompetence, but won her unemployment appeal because the hearing officer determined that she was, quote, performing the duties to the best of her ability. And, quote, did the best she could with her education and training to meet the expectations of the employer. She then refashioned herself as a constitutional law professor, teaching pre-law to undergrads at a Christian college in Colorado and self-publishing a book decrying the Supreme Court's legalization of gay marriage. After stints at religious advocacy groups, she landed in the former president's orbit, branding herself a member of the elite strike force that was going to keep Trump in the White House. They did not, in fact, keep Trump in the White House, and Ellis's contribution didn't even rate a mention in Jack Smith's DC indictment. But Ellis managed to get herself a couple of charges in Georgia, so congrats on the new profile pic. And while Rudy, Sidney, and Jenna were flinging themselves at the courts and legislatures trying to get themselves to snatch Biden's electors, a team of lawyers behind the scenes were cooking up the legal justification for the plot to substitute fake electors for the real ones on January 6th. 2 of those managed to get themselves named by Jack Smith in DC and indicted by Fani Willis in Fulton County. John Eastman, aka co-conspirator 2, and Ken Chesebro, aka co-conspirator number 5, lent intellectual heft to the project, each drafting a series of memos assuring their co-conspirators that this was all very legal and very cool. In fact, Chesebro explicitly stated that a crucial prong of his plan was, quote, messaging that presents this as a routine measure that is necessary to ensure that in the event the courts or state legislatures were to later conclude that Trump actually won the state, the correct electoral slate can be counted in Congress in January. But not a single swing state was flipped by a court or state legislature, so by January, Eastman and Chesebro had decided on a new plan. They wanted Vice President Pence to unilaterally reject electoral votes, throwing the elections for Trump. Both men privately acknowledged that the Supreme Court was unlikely to accept their reasoning, but pressed ahead anyway in the hopes that Pence would cave to the mob and toss out the votes of millions of Americans. Eastman made the additional error of using his work email for his coup plotting, which is, just a rookie mistake. And to prevent those emails from getting out, he sued to block his former employer, Chapman University, from disclosing his communications to the House January 6th committee in 2021. A federal judge found that Eastman, like Evan Corcoran, had likely participated in a crime with his client Donald Trump, and so the emails had to be turned over under the crime fraud exception to the attorney-client privilege. The lawsuit also had the effect of publicizing Eastman's communications, including a message sent to Vice President Pence's top lawyer during the siege at the Capitol, in which the lawyer encouraged, quote, one more relatively minor violation since the mob had already disrupted the certification under the Electoral Count Act. Eastman was charged with 9 counts in Georgia, while Chesebro netted 7 charges. Eastman is also facing disbarment proceedings, as is Rudy Giuliani, as well as another entrant into F-tier, former DOJ environmental lawyer Jeff Clark, aka co-conspirator 4, a Justice Department official who worked on civil matters and who, with the defendant, attempted to use the Justice Department to open sham election crime investigations and influence state legislatures with knowingly false claims of election fraud. Clark also tried to persuade acting Attorney General Jeffrey Rosen to send a proof of concept letter to the swing state legislatures, encouraging them to reconvene and steal Biden's electoral votes based on FBI investigations of major election fraud. But those investigations did not exist, and Rosen refused to send the letter. The confrontation resulted in an Oval Office showdown on January 3rd, 2021, where the entire senior leadership of the Justice Department, as well as Trump's White House counsel, threatened to quit if Trump put Clark in charge of the DOJ. In September of 2022, the FBI seized Clark's phone, and now he's facing a couple of charges in Georgia. On the plus side, according to Rolling Stone, he's on the short list to be Attorney General in a second Trump White House. And then last, we have Trump's in-house counsel, Boris Epshteyn, aka Season 7 Michael Cohen, aka co-conspirator 6, a political consultant who helped implement a plan to submit fraudulent slates of presidential electors to obstruct the certification proceeding, allegedly. Epstein is one of Trump's closest advisors, to the consternation of his other lawyers, who complain that Trump's political strategy consistently trumps his legal strategy. Epstein is reported to have talked Trump into several of his loonier legal filings, including suits in Florida against the Pulitzer Prize Board and New York Attorney General Letitia James. He also had his phone seized by the FBI in September 2021 and testified to the grand jury about the fake electors plot, in which he coordinated Giuliani's efforts on the ground, while Chesebro and Eastman worked behind the scenes. This effort has not made him popular with Trump's personal lawyers, who blame him for Trump's disastrous legal strategy, particularly in the documents case. And then last but not least, not even making it onto F tier, let's give an honorable mention to Alan Dershowitz, the famed Harvard law professor emeritus, who represented Trump in the first impeachment. And while Dersh has not officially represented Trump since 2020, he contributes to the cause by defending the former president daily in right-wing media. While insisting that he's a liberal Democrat, Dershowitz insists that the sitting president cannot prosecute a former president under the Nixon standard, which is just something that he invented. He predicts that the E. Jean Carroll verdict will be overturned since the jury only found him liable for kinda molesting her, and he confidently asserts that the call where Trump demanded that Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger find 11,780 votes is actually evidence that Trump was simply demanding another recount, despite that there had been 3 recounts by then. And he does it without being paid a nickel by Trump's PAC, just a stand-up guy. And another F-tier habit of Trump's is eating steak with ketchup. But if you'd like a delicious S-tier meal delivered straight to your door, today's sponsor Factor can help. Because Factor makes meeting your nutrition goals easier than ever by delivering fresh, never frozen, dietitian-approved meals right to your doorstep. And the meals are completely ready to eat. So you can eliminate the hours that it would take to shop, meal prep, and cook so you can spend your day doing the things that you actually want to do. Factor meals arrive pre-prepared and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. In the same amount of time that I could put on my shoes to go to the grocery store, my Factor meal is already done. Because sometimes I just want a good, healthy meal without having to cook, and it's surprisingly affordable. And now Factor offers Gourmet Plus meals as part of your weekly options, which means you can get a little gourmet with your meal plan whenever you're craving something special. Gourmet meals like Surf and Turf or Surf and Surf, shrimp and salmon. All of Factor's meals are extremely delicious, like bruschetta shrimp risotto, green goddess chicken, and grilled steakhouse filet mignon, ready in just 2 minutes. Their menus are updated weekly with 34 different options, so you can choose your favorite meals or let Factor craft your order based on your taste preferences and meal history. So give Factor a try by heading to Factor75.com and use the code LegalEagle50 to get 50% off your first Factor box. Or just click on the link that's on screen right now or down in the description and use code LegalEagle50 to get 50% off your first Factor box. So click below right now. After that, click on this box over here for more Legal Eagle, or I'll see you in court.